Naura Technology Group is reportedly now one of the 5 largest chip equipment companies on Earth. Applied Materials has held a position near the top of that list for roughly 30 years. Naura has been a serious contender for approximately 30 months. Before you conclude that China simply outspent the West into submission, that is not what the revenue record shows, and it is not the interesting part of this story. Chip equipment rankings determine who supplies the tools that build every processor on the planet. Phones, data centers, cars, medical devices. All of it runs on chips built with tools from a small list of companies. If that list is reshuffling, the supply chain for all of modern computing is reshuffling with it. By the end, you will understand the actual mechanism that moved these rankings, why it has almost nothing to do with the 3 explanations most analysts reach for first, and what it means for the next decade of semiconductor competition. This is not really a story about Naura's engineering. It is about what happens to the shelf in a fab when the foreign tools are pulled off it, and who gets to fill it. Who is actually buying these tools, and why now? The subsidies argument sounds complete, but there is a number that breaks it. And Naura makes etch tools specifically. That is a particular process step. And why that step matters so much is the piece that ties the whole thing together. To understand why the ranking is meaningful, you need to understand what a chip equipment ranking actually measures. It is not a poll. It is not a trade publication's opinion. It is booked revenue from tools that fabs physically install and run. Think of it like a restaurant ranking based on seats filled, not reservations taken. You cannot fake the occupancy number. Either the diners showed up or they did not. A tool sitting in a warehouse does not count. A government grant to the toolmaker does not count. What counts is a fab signing a capital expenditure, qualifying the tool over a 12 to 24-month procurement cycle, and running wafers through it. Fabs do not do that with tools they cannot use. The economics are too punishing. So when a company's revenue rises enough to move it into the global top 20, real customers made real purchases. The ranking is a real signal. The question is, what changed to make that revenue possible? In October 2022, the United States Bureau of Industry and Security tightened export controls on advanced semiconductor equipment to China in a significant way, with further expansions following in 2023. The restrictions covered tools from Applied Materials, Lam Research, and KLA, among others. Extreme ultraviolet lithography from ASML had been effectively blocked even before the 2022 rules. The logic was straightforward. Deny China access to the tools that build advanced chips, and you slow the development of advanced chips. The restrictions were real, the suppliers named were the dominant global players, and the effect on Chinese fabs was immediate. Here is what the policy did not account for. A fab does not stop buying equipment because the foreign supplier is blocked. It keeps buying equipment because it has to. Every new wafer line needs tools. Every capacity expansion needs tools. And etch is required dozens of times per wafer, across every process node from the most mature to the most advanced. When a Chinese fab needed new etch capacity after 2022, in the restricted categories, the foreign tools were legally off the shelf. Naura's tools were on it. The fab bought Naura. Not because Naura won a competitive evaluation against Applied Materials, because Applied Materials was no longer an option. Imagine the only gas station on a 200-mile highway closes. The next station does not need to be cheaper or better. It just needs to be open. Some fabs did stockpile foreign tools before the bans tightened. That was a real and documented response. But capacity expansions after the restrictions require new tools, and new tools in restricted categories must come from domestic suppliers. Every quarter of new fab construction in China that touches a restricted equipment category is a forced purchase order for a Chinese toolmaker. Multiply that across the scale of Chinese fab investment since 2022, and the revenue math becomes straightforward. Naura's ranking did not come from nowhere. It came from this. Now here is where an honest read requires separating two things that often get collapsed together. The revenue behind these rankings is real. A fab's capital expenditure is not a subsidy. It is a business transaction that requires the tool to perform well enough not to be returned. Subsidies go to the company, not to the fab's purchase order. A state-owned fab still files a procurement justification. The tool still has to run, so the ranking reflects genuine commercial activity. That much is established. What the ranking does not reflect is open market competitiveness. Chinese fabs did not choose Naura over Applied Materials in a fair evaluation. They chose Naura because Applied Materials was no longer available. Those are different things, and conflating them produces two opposite errors. Either dismissing the ranking as meaningless because the market is captive, or treating it as proof of technical parity because the revenue is real. Both interpretations miss the actual situation. By some analyst estimates, China accounts for roughly 25 to 30% of global wafer fab equipment spending. That is not a rounding error. That is one of the largest single-country markets on Earth. When that market is functionally closed to foreign suppliers in restricted categories, the domestic revenue flowing to Chinese toolmakers is not a trickle, it is a flood. And analysts suggest that Naura's tools are reportedly better suited to mature nodes, approximately 28 nanometer and above, than to leading-edge advanced nodes. That matters because most chips by volume in the world are made on mature nodes. Consumer electronics, automotive chips, industrial controllers, the overwhelming majority of semiconductors shipped globally do not require the most advanced process. A captive market in mature node equipment is genuinely large commercial territory, even if it is not the frontier. The leading edge gap is real and should not be understated. Extreme ultraviolet lithography, advanced deposition for sub-5 nanometer processes. As of the available evidence, domestic Chinese suppliers have not closed those gaps. The shelf in that part of the fab is still largely empty. The rankings reflect what has been filled, not what has not. It is also not just Naura. Two other Chinese tool makers reportedly entered the global top 20 in the same period. That pattern suggests the mechanism is operating across multiple equipment categories simultaneously: etch, chemical vapor deposition, wafer cleaning, and related steps, not as a single company's success story, but as a system-wide forced substitution. The entire domestic Chinese equipment ecosystem received the same demand signal at the same time, because the export controls applied across the same range of tool categories at the same time. The rankings are evidence of a supply chain restructuring, not a single breakthrough. Here is my honest read. Dismiss neither the ranking nor the caveat. They are both telling you something true. The revenue is real. You cannot manufacture a capital equipment procurement cycle. 3 companies entering the global top 20 on real fab purchases is a commercial fact that matters for the supply chain of all of computing. At the same time, the market that created that revenue is not a competitive one. And there is a version of this story where captive market revenue becomes a ceiling rather than a floor. A company that wins every sale because the alternative is banned never faces the pressure that forces its tools to be genuinely world-class. The most important thing to watch is not whether these companies stay in the top 20. It is whether fab customers start choosing them when they do not have to. The shelf that used to hold Applied Materials tools is now stocked with Naura. That is a real change in the structure of the global semiconductor supply chain. What we do not yet know is whether the products on that shelf are good enough to stay there if foreign tools come back, or whether a future policy shift reveals that captive market scale and open market competitiveness are two different things that did not converge the way the rankings suggest. Here's what I want your read on. Does a captive home market accelerate a tool maker toward world-class capability because you have real revenue, real scale, and real fab feedback that compounds into genuine technical progress? Or does it slow them down because you never have to be the best to win the sale? Answer in the comments. I want your honest read on which side of that you are on and why. Subscribe. We are tracking this equipment race milestone by milestone as it actually unfolds, not after the consensus has already formed. The shelf got filled. Whether what is on it earns its place. That is the story the next decade writes.